It was a sunny spring day in May when Italian Andrea Cazzolo woke up excited and happy. Today's the day of the match that had been booked months prior, the European Cup final between Liverpool and Juventus. The first thing he glanced at when he opened his eyes was the uniform of his team hung neatly behind his room door. He had bought the uniform months ago and wanted to wear it on an important occasion, like today. On the 10th of January, 630 AD, the Islamic army, led by Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace and blessings be upon him, entered Makkah, conquering the city and destroying its idols. It was the day of their greatest victory, and as a sign of this victory, a man ascended to the top of the Kaaba and raised the call to prayer. Allah. It's important to mention that Islam was revealed to the Arabs in a place called the Arabian Peninsula, and the language of the Quran is Arabic. Also, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and most of the Muslims at that time were pure Arabs. And most importantly, their pride in their Arabism was and still is a huge part of their identity. Now for the first surprise. The one who raised the call to prayer in that historic moment was not an Arab, but an Abyssinian. Abyssinians are not Arabs. That man's name was Bilal ibn Rabah. I'll tell you the second piece of amazing information in a moment. But first, let me give you a fictitious scenario. A person goes to the doctor and discovers that he has, may Allah protect us all, a brain tumor. One of the symptoms of brain tumors is high fever. The doctor gives him some aspirin and sends him home. If that scenario was real, the patient would die, and the doctor would be guilty of killing him. Treating an isolated symptom while neglecting the root disease inevitably kills the patient. Football hooliganism is not a disease in itself, but a symptom of a disease that's worse and more deeply rooted in history and human nature than we can imagine. The disease is called tribalism. It's the tendency of man to favor those who resemble him in form or principle, and to fight the rest. Do you remember the football war, which started after El Salvador beat Honduras in the World Cup qualifying match? There were riots that literally evolved into a war with fighter jets and tanks. Wait, absurdity is everywhere, but to this degree? Yes. Remember what I just said. Football hooliganism is just a symptom of the disease of tribalism. And in this situation, the disease was in its late stages, and so was its manifestation, as the two countries hated each other for political reasons. Each of them had been waiting for an opportunity to tear the other apart. Do you think that a citizen of either of those two countries would stand up against his own country's army in this madness? Perhaps, but Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, help your brother, whether he was the oppressed or the oppressor, and the way you do the latter is by stopping him from his oppression. The same theory applies, be it to a tribe that wears feathers and fights with spears in the forests, or one that wears a uniform-colored shirt and fights with flares in the stands. That's why the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, he who calls to tribalism, or fights for tribalism, or dies for tribalism is not from us. The Islamic nation is not based on the exclusion of others, as is the case in various human groups, whether political, national, or even fan clubs. Rather, Islam is based on the exclusion of those who call for exclusion. The Prophet Muhammad said, Allah has removed you from the burden of ignorance and its pride in the ancestors. You're either pious believers or an immoral wretch. Verily, every human child is a child of Adam, and Adam was created from dirt. Now, let me tell you about the second point, about Bilal ibn Rabah, the man who raised the call to prayer on the day of the great victory. Many Muslims, rather most of them, do not know that his origin was not Arab. That's because Islam had already cleansed the ignorance of tribalism from the hearts of those who transmitted these events to us. Caring about a person's genealogical roots was insignificant. He was a Muslim, and that was it. There's always something that distinguishes you from the person sitting next to you, be it color, language, race, family, appearance, age, intelligence, education, wealth, occupation, or even sports teams. You will never lack a way to exclude the other in some way. That's why the noble Quran set a common principle for all human beings, and then established not the most important, but the only criterion to differentiate between human beings. Listen to this.
يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير.
That person you hate on the other side is not just the other team embodied, he's just another person. Maybe this person came to enjoy this match with his son. Maybe his name was Giovanni Cazzola, who was only 45 years old, who traveled with his son Andre, that we mentioned in the beginning of this video, to Hazel Stadium in Belgium to watch the European final, and neither of them ever returned. Or maybe he was just a young boy who wrote a letter saying that if he dies for any reason, his eye corneas should be donated to those who need them. His name was Anis Mohit. Karouhi, an Egyptian who also died in the riots in 2012 when he was only 15 years old. Or maybe his name was Santos Abreu, the Brazilian who himself was a football player and was killed on the field when he was only 31 years old. Or Christopher Loftus, who was English and just 37